Hey climbers, welcome back to Climb by VSC, a weekly show about building and scaling startups in the world of climate innovation. My name is Vijay Kapoor, general partner of VSC Ventures and co-host of Climb. Every week, I or a member of our VSC team will speak with a pioneer in the climate tech world about emerging technologies and novel ideas that will turn the tide on climate change. We've all heard enough of the doom and gloom. It's time for stories of purpose-driven innovation that lead to sustainable, positive change. As always, I'm so happy that you've decided to join us. Now let's climb.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Climb by VSC, where we interview interesting founders and VCs and folks in the climate space. I'm really excited to have Shane Dyer on the podcast today to be talking about everything that he's working on with Irrigreen. Welcome to the show.
Oh, man, so happy to be here.
Well, I'd love to know, actually, more about your background. You've got a story background. I know that you've done a lot of work with Stanford, and you've worked on Whirlpool products and Mattel. So Shane, why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself?
I came out of Teresa Meng's lab at Stanford, which was mainly doing a lot of very early work back in the old days on networking and distributed sensor networks. And very clearly on, the internet was coming on just strong right there. You know, the Netscape browser had just been released, so there was a lot of excitement. And I think the thing that I was always really fascinated with was how powerful you could make things if you took non-computer devices and connected them to the internet. So my whole career has been kind of starting companies in there from, doing, one of the very first sort of, camera connected to cell phone startups to help, auction houses and things and like high photo workflow insurance companies out to my last company, which was an IoT platform for high volume consumer products. So if you've had those like Chamberlain or LiftMaster garage doors that you can, remember when you forget to close your garage door and you leave your house and you have to push the button, we did the technology behind those. And so that's always been a really passion. And when we sold that company in 2017, we definitely felt the success for that. Had worked on like 60 different IoT products, everything from toys to pumps to all these things. But I found two things, which was one, I was really excited about those kinds of products that became better and more climate friendly when you added networking to them. And then the second thing was I really wanted to nail one product. Running a platform company is great. It has a lot of advantages, but you don't really control anything. And so I think when I met Gary, who was my co-founder, he was an inkjet printer inventor. And he had been working on, turns out if you're an inkjet printer inventor and you look at sprinkler systems, they drive you bat crazy. Just looking down how they put water down and you see water running down the sidewalk or the thing. And you basically can't do anything but start a company to solve this problem. And he had just, they had just released, he'd been working on the printer technology in his garage for like 4 years, just starting to get that out, get that tested. And it, was really clear to me that this had to be an internet connected first product to bring things like weather data and sort of, cloud intelligence to the way we do irrigation. And, from there, that's where we got together, and it just made a lot of sense to make a company. And, from my side, I got 2 kids in California. It's not clear there's going to be water around left for them if we don't do something serious. There's a lot of startups focused on, carbon and oil products and, electric cars and solar. So I think we can get that problem under hand. But water was something where it didn't seem like the same level of resources and intellect were being applied there. And so it was a really open space for us to consider attacking.
How did you get to the phase that you were like, we are going to attack this? Because there are so many options.
I think at the time we were doing some work with Fresno State on measuring the efficiency of like printing water, using Irrigreen's digital sprinklers. And they had just gotten the survey back where, when we combined it with weather data that we could bring down to it, it was pretty clear that to the same crop growth, whether that was like grass for landscaping or something like that, we could use about 50% less water. And so I think I remember running back to the hotel room and doing work on water rates in high water cost areas like Texas and Colorado. And, I came back to Gary and I'm like, look, we've got the patents on this. And, the ROI for replacing your irrigation system is about 2x solar. So there's something about the size of the solar business here. And there's not a whole lot of people other than us doing this right now. Let's go let's go make this happen. And Gary had already started the company at that point, but it was just like, at this point, I'm like, okay, I'm all in. Let's actually turn this into a real business.
Okay, so where is the business at today?
The product Irrigreen 2, which was kind of our first commercially viable product, non-beta product. You always hear about like the Apple II, but you don't hear about the Apple I. That was the one in the wood box, right? So that was kind of our first big non-beta product that was launched about 2 years ago. And as soon as we got that in the market, like it was just immediately clear that we had product market fit. Our sales guys, we're selling that originally like, residential was the beachhead segment because that's the folks that pay the most money for water. And the first robotic, digital sprinkler heads were a little smaller. And, the salespeople were closing at like, more than 20% rate, which is unheard of. Like solar salespeople close at like 3%. So it was just really clear that we had a winner at that point. And then the company's been kind of growing at like 2 to 4x every year since then. So it's been kind of one of those kind of hang on to your hat, you got something here. A lot of this was just, one of our VCs said this, but they basically went and did the surveying and said, hey, Shane, there's like $3 billion worth of latent hate people have for their existing irrigation systems, which I'm sure as someone with a yard, you can understand. There's always broken heads. There's always water running down the street. There's always like swampy patches and then dry yellow spots. It's something that was just ripe for some really good innovation.
Talk to me about like how easy is it to set up?
Yeah. So, this is one of those areas where when you start a company, you always end up innovating in areas you never expected. So one of the key areas was to give like somebody that has a home a tool on our website. So if you go to our website, there's a little which is www.irrigreen.com. There's a little box where you can just enter in your address, and that actually pulls up, sort of a Google satellite view of your home, and you can literally just kind of take some dots and trace out the areas you want to irrigate, and then you can drag in these digital heads to see how many of them you need to irrigate that area. But in general, you only need about one Irrigreen head for about every 8 to 10 mechanical heads. So it's a lot simpler in order to put in. And then it tells you how much the system will cost, but it also, given that area and what you're growing, it'll kind of give you an estimate of how much water you'll save per year. So it's very easy to go back to your water bill and kind of sit there and go, oh, this is a project that would pay for itself in 3 years or 5 years if I put it in that digital system versus if I put in the traditional mechanical technology that wastes far more water.
Oh, that's so smart. And I'm reading a lot about new startups that are working on like wildfire detection products as it relates to having do you envision one day like Irrigreen having sensors to be able to do anything wildfire related?
We have people taking our products and doing crazy things with them, which I really love. And we tend to learn from those. Like we've had folks like watering clay tennis courts to maintain those because this is a much more accurate way to water. And we have had some folks working on, using Irrigreen sprinkler systems for wildfire as well, to basically get houses wet if they're in areas of path of fire. Again, these are very early times, so we're just learning about these applications now. We don't have any dedicated products for them. But as soon as you get something on the internet and it gets out there, you see it being used in the most creative and wonderful ways. And I have to say, like a lot of our new features and our new roadmap is driven by these landscapers or these homeowners that want something or are exploring something new in their system. So we use, our customers and our community as a huge source of innovation.
Yeah. Actually, I want to go back for a second. When you're launching the product to start with, so many IoT products start as a Kickstarter campaign in order to get the community. Is that the route that you took when it came to launching the product, or did you just go direct?
I think that would have killed us because our product has some pretty big, fundamental, deep technology. Like a lot of the fluid dynamics around designing the printer port and the fact that we have to have software in the robotic sprinkler heads, and software in the controller, software in the cloud, and then iOS and Android software, where the schedule for it, there was really about 5 years of dedicated R&D before we had a viable product. And I think that's just, I don't think deep tech is a really good place for Kickstarter. in that, people you generally want to wait that long for the product to come out. So I think for us, that wasn't the right fit. But then as soon as we had it, using e-commerce and using a lot of the online channels, especially like a lot of the lawn influencers and the people that really care about growing, great landscaping, they've been invaluable. As soon as they got a hold of Irrigreen, just the accuracy improvements, became the way to grow the very best lawn. And that was one of the, the first things that kind of caught fire for us. So we got a number of customers from those folks, but just because of the R&D cycle and the amount of scientific development that had to go on first, we probably weren't a good fit for like a Kickstarter.
So when you were working on the smart garage door openers, what are some maybe lessons that you learned working on that technology that you've applied now to what you're doing with Irrigreen? I'm sure there's got to be like a lot of similarities.
Well, I think Irrigreen was like the 61st IoT product I'd worked on. And so I think there were lessons through that entire 61st. Yeah. We had like Irrigreen had about 60 different IoT products that we enabled. From pool pumps to garage doors to, washing machines to, connected lighting to, sensors like that. So we just seen so many things that I was able to kind of pattern match and go, what are the very, very best practices that we saw, particularly sort of, preparing for scale and putting scalable architectures in place. The other thing that was really interesting to us was really putting the humans at the center of this. So really understanding, we'd seen a lot of the pitfalls of making IoT products that were too hard to use, and being really simple and really intuitive was something that we were, very, very excited about from the start. So we had spent the time to put a lot of the really complicated architecture in place so that it could be simple for the user. So little things like, when you wander around in your backyard and you run out of Wi-Fi, how can you still talk to your sprinkler system in a way that, that makes that whole piece seamless? So there's a lot of very interesting technology in terms of handoffs and things like that, that have to be in place in order to have this really simple experience for the consumer.
What other things have you heard from customers that they're like, this is what I want to do differently with my yard and watering it?
I think the huge one is like, I just had kind of the enthusiasm from them of, instead of having all these sprinkler heads that were, some of them were broken, they were always spraying on your car or your fence or your house. You had wet spots and, yellow spots, dry spots on your lawn. And you've replaced that with this one kind of like Bellagio fountain that sits in the center of the zone and then perfectly traces, your landscape area. So not a drop of water is missed, going into the driveway or going onto the hardscape. And like, what I didn't really get at the beginning is how much people just enjoy the experience of having this thing pop up and then perfectly sort of trace these shapes in front of them. Like we hear all these reports of like, I had this barbecue and I turned my system on for everyone and they got to see my sprinkler basically tracing this really complicated shape in my front driveway. And it's almost like, entertainment at that point to go through. But at the same time, there's 50% of the water. So if somewhere in California or in Texas or Colorado where the water's expensive, if they got a reasonable sized lawn, some of them are saving, $1,000, per year or more off their water bill. So it's not just, being green, it's also being, smart with your wallet. And I think those stories are the ones that move me the most and, get me up in the bed in the morning to make sure we invent the next thing.
You have to imagine it's really difficult to engineer that. Like my brain, I'm trying to understand, like, how would you even prepare the lawn? Like, and I put my address into the website. So I know, like, I was playing around with it to see, like, where to put all these sprinkler heads. Can you, like, walk me through how you built a team to be able to do that on so many yards that are really unique?
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that I've always loved companies that have hardware and software and communications, because you need these really diverse teams that work together really well. It's kind of like, IoT companies with hardware in them are kind of like the decathlon of startups, in that, you have to be good at lots of different events. You have to be able to pole vault and sprint and run a mile and all these other parts. And I think that's really sort of appealed to me and been the kind of company that I've really enjoyed building. But what it also means is you really need a deep talent pool of people that are experts in these various areas, from wireless networking to hardware design, to fluid dynamics, to, the sort of agriculture and sort of, biology models that you need to be able to, to get water in. And so you really end up creating almost like a science team across the folks you put together in order to do this project right. So it's not something you can do really quickly. And let me tell you, it's painful in some ways to get a company like this started, but it provides so much, so much sort of competitive advantage to get it in there, because it's not a product that's very easy for someone else to create a copy of or something else like that. You have to get a lot of parts right. And also just in terms of like getting the reliability profiles right. You've got this, robot head that has to last for 10 years in really harsh environments, freezing and, Phoenix 130-degree days and things like this as well. So it's not an easy problem, but I think those are the problems that, if you solve them well, really allow you to just take over a market or take over an industry.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And it also seems like you two would need the same type of an investor that's equally part of it. What has it been like on the fundraising front?
I think, so far we just did another, off schedule close, a few months ago. Surprised. The great part about this is I think we've built a real company. I mean, it's got the dynamics. It's very close to profitable, things like this as well. So that part has made fundraising, even in a difficult environment, really, much easier for us than maybe an earlier stage. Hardware, companies, we are a software company at the heart, but we do have hardware components. And so, my first question to any VC is, am I going to be your first hardware investment? And if the answer is yes, then that's probably not the right fit. So finding, best that, even if it's a software company, they've invested in companies that have had hardware enablers for the software is absolutely key. And then I think the other one was, getting a mix of folks that were also very interested in climate. So finding investors that, really understood the impact that, that water savings had, not just on our water resources, but also you can look at places like California, where it has a huge impact directly to carbon. If you take a city like San Diego, as the population grows, they have to find more water. And in many cases, that water is done through desalination, right? Which is incredibly energy intensive. And a lot of that's driven by natural gas, or just the cost of pumping water from Northern California into Southern California. That is, I think that's the number one largest single user of electricity in California, is moving water, across the state. So that was a big fit for us for finding our initial investors.
And so have you found that cities and municipalities are also interested in the product too?
Very much so. I think that we've had a number reach outbound to us, and we've done some small projects. We'll probably want to build like a larger head to go after some of the more, municipal pieces, if they have large parks or something else like that as well. And we're working with a number of customers on that.
That makes a lot of sense. And so going back, you were talking about the sales team was like blown away after the launch.
Yeah.
Usually like with an IoT product, like the Nest cameras I have around my house, I go to the Lowe's and I like test them out and play with them and tinker. And there used to be beta in San Francisco, which was so fun to test out like new IoT product. Rest in peace, loved beta. But how do you get the product out in front of homeowners?
Well, I think, a lot of this is sort of the power of the internet, which is as soon as we had not just us putting content around about how do we install these products, how do they work, but we also had this other community, especially of like folks that have been folks that have done it for their lawn and posted up or put something on Reddit, or tons and tons of YouTube. If you YouTube Irrigreen, you get, hundreds of videos of very dedicated people for their lawn showing you how this works for them and how they put it in, how they modified it, and all these other pieces like that. So I think that created this sort of just snowball of interest in Irrigreen. And then we kind of coupled that with, both really good e-commerce with a lot of explanations of the product and videos of how to walk it through, a lot of content around that. And then also, we have our irrigation pros, which are, anytime you want, you can set up a meeting with one of these experts that can basically just look at your lawn and help you design a system for it and answer all your questions. And the combination of those three things, created a really, really successful direct model. the other part is just, IoT smart service, right? The ability for that sprinkler head to tell when there's a leak or tell when something's gone wrong. You go from playing defense, right, which was the old days when you went on a trip and you came home and there was either you had a lake in your backyard that wasn't there before and you had a $4,000 water bill, or you came home and all the expensive landscaping you'd put in is dead and you've got to spend thousands of dollars to replace it. So, with IoT and the ability to have this connected, it basically tells you when there's a problem and you can correct it before the leak goes too far or before your landscaping has died. And so having heads that tell you about their health turns out to be really, really important if you want to do landscaping in a more evolved way.
Do you envision that the platform will also give homeowners the ability to know where it's good to plant things or not based on the location? Because you already have it mapped out their whole yard. So could you offer features
We're starting to play around with things like this as well. And I don't want to put too many spoilers out there, but stay tuned. Plant recognition and things like that that technology has come along so far. That part of AI is really, really evolved at this point. So those are certainly things we're thinking about how to take advantage of. I mean, the way I look at this right now is, these printing digital sprinklers that Irrigreen makes, it's kind of like the very first airplanes, right? This is like Kitty Hawk at this point, and there's an entire sort of aviation industry to invent here, and we're just super excited because there's lots and lots of directions to go with this product. And now that you have, people that are buying it or happy with it, that really helps us drive our whole team, forward and scale the company.
Oh my gosh, well, I can't wait I'm going to buy it. I'm going to have it. We're just talking to my husband about getting them installed. We'll do that. And then I want to be part of your customer group to get product ideas because I have ideas galore.
I know. We need you in there. We need these ideas.
I'm curious. You talked about working on 60 other projects before this.
Yep.
Were there any that haven't seen the light of day, or maybe ones that didn't work out that you wished had?
Oh, man. Let's see. I'll tell you one that really lit me up. I mean, Pentair did some really interesting internet-connected pumps. And what was interesting to me about those projects were if you internet connected them and basically figured out the times when swimming pool pumps didn't have to run as long, and you could turn them down so they used less electricity. When you started to model that across a city like LA that had so many swimming pools, you could actually see these really cool macroeconomic effects on how we could do better in climate by just being more intelligent. And so I think I noticed that those were the kind of products that, really lit me up when IoT was doing something that was actually, for good, that kind of, pushed me forward and really, really got me excited about doing Irrigreen with Gary.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, it's all about efficiency for customers and for the environment too. I mean, there has to be better ways to conserve water. I mean, I just look at my neighbors here across the street, and we're not really in a drought anymore, but I feel like California really always is in a drought. And when you see how much is wasted when the sprinkler head is just going everywhere, and it's hard on your bills. We all want to save money too with inflation. So
yeah, and I think people that don't even consider themselves environmentalists still want to be good stewards for resources in their environment. It's not a good look if there's water running down your sidewalk after you water.
Well, is there anything else I should have asked you about today? I've enjoyed this conversation. Where can people find you?
Oh, the easiest way to do Irrigreen is just go to irrigreen.com, IRRIGREEN.com. And you'll basically see the videos there, but you'll also be able to put in your own house or your folks' house or your friend's house that has a yard and figure out really quickly what it would cost to put in a system. And also, more importantly, it'll reach back to 3 years of weather data to figure out how much water you'll save. So it's a really fun exercise. It only takes 5 minutes or so to do, but it gives you a really good idea of what it could do for you. And then I think just kind of be part of the revolution. There's no downside to this. You're going to grow up beautiful green landscaping. You'll be the envy of your neighborhood, but you're also going to be doing your part to kind of help save. And hopefully, the system will pay for itself over time with water bill savings. So it's kind of a no-brainer. It's a good way to sort of get on board and do something in a little more evolved way.
I love that. Thank you so much, Shane, for joining us today on the show.
Well, that's all for this week's episode of Climb by VSC. Thank you so much for watching and listening. Special thanks to Credo for their help in producing and promoting this episode. To visit any part of today's conversation again, you can find the full transcript on vscventures.com. Our thanks to Josue Ramiro for posting these every week. Lastly, if you've listened this far, please leave us a rating on Spotify or review on iTunes. It only takes a few seconds, really helps us out, and as far as I know, still carbon neutral. Well, that's all for now. We'll see you all next week on Climb by VSC.